I got Matthew Hatfield on today from Virginia Preps and many other hustles. Matthew is a guy that has done a lot for the exposure of high school athletes, their teams, the coaches, the players. When I told folks I was going to talk to you today, a guy that I think very highly of, Mike Dufresne, wanted me to make sure you knew how much you did for his program and how great he thinks you are. And I think a lot of people most appreciate all the work you've done. So thanks for coming on.
Our pleasure. And Mike's a good friend, used to coach at Osborne High School. Remember his team that made the state playoffs with Jay Lane and Robbie Carter and Big Izzy inside. Isaac Freeman had a good team. I'm leaving out a few guys, Belford, Delaney. I'm sure they'll get mad at me too. But he's like a principal now, isn't he? He's been all over the place doing some big things in administration, I believe.
Yeah, he was actually a principal in West Virginia during the lockdown. I think not too far from actually Romney. And then he came back to North Carolina. He's living not too far from the Nags Head area, inland. And I think his wife is teaching his wife who I went to high school with is teaching in Chesapeake, Virginia. And Mike is an assistant principal, I believe.
Oh, wow. Good for him. Yeah, he's a good man and did a great job with that Osborne program for sure. And then they're doing good things still with Rocky Carter at the helm now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, they are. Yeah, I hear a lot of good things about him too. So, well, look, before we get into that, because I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. First, maybe you could introduce all your different gigs and hustles you do. I know you work with Old Dominion in the media with them now. I know you've been tweeting scores of games for many, many years. You were involved in high school sports before the masses came in. I mean, we all liked high school sports, and we all went to the games. The games meant a lot. But you saw the media potential in it before I think a lot of people did. So, after you maybe describe some of your big picture, maybe talk about your journey, how you got started in high school sports.
Sure, appreciate that. You do a great job with everything you've been doing, Julian. I started with Virginia Preps in December of 2004. The man that ran the website then, Zirkle Blakey, who I'm forever grateful for reaching out to me. I was just doing a lot of stuff with pro and college sports. I tried to do my own type of magazine a la Phil Steele for college football. I did stuff on my own website where I'd predict games and pro and college. And I was really more into high school football. My folks, who I kind of claim like my parents, were band parents for the Kempsville High School band for many years. So I would go to high school football games on Friday nights in the late 90s, early 2000s, and really just went to just Kempsville games. But then around 2002, the radio station that I worked for with Max Media, that's ESPN Radio 94.1 in Virginia Beach, was doing a high school football scoreboard show. So I was like, that'd be pretty neat, because I was at that time young, ambitious, didn't know much, still kind of don't, learning things. And I was going to games. I said, well, I'll just phone in reports at the Kempsville games. So I did that in 2002. And then I kind of got more interested in high school football around 2003 or 4 locally. And Virginia Preps reached out to me about I would post on their message boards at the time, well, we need a high school basketball guy. So I started in December of 2004, and I knew literally next to nothing about high school basketball. I never even gone to any games, maybe one or two casually, but so I literally got tasked with, at the time, as you know, things have changed with the classifications and the realignment with the Virginia High School League that happened right around 2013. So back then it was the old AAA, AA, single A, Eastern region, Northern region, Central region, Northwest region. And this all started out as just a local thing, 757, just Tidewater teams, did not even morph into the state, which now it is. And I watch more and pay attention to more than I need to probably do and care to explain. But so I literally was like, I get tasked to do a preview on this, and I know next to nothing. I pick up a Street and Smith's magazine. I see we have a couple ranked teams at the time, Woodside High School and Newport News, which won back-to-back state championships, and they were coached by John Richardson, who's now an assistant at Old Dominion. They were really good. And Norcom High School in Portsmouth, which has obviously ascended into a program that people know statewide with the numerous state titles they've won under Leon Goolsby, and with that great trio they had with Dorian Finney-Smith, who plays for the Dallas Mavericks, and Jeremy Canty and Carlos Anderson when they won all their championships. They were a pretty big deal because they had Vernon Macklin, aka Big Ticket, who was a nationally ranked player, went on to play in the NBA. Outside of that, and then picking up a Virginian Pilot and seeing what their previews were, I didn't know. I basically looked off what they were doing and kind of began to learn. And I knew there was 3 pretty decorated coaches in our area. And as you know, with Northern Virginia, there's so many outstanding coaches across the state. And that really is a big way of how we get our job done. I knew that the kind of recognizable names, Jack Baker, who retired at Maury, 700 plus wins, Bill Cochran at Salem High in Virginia Beach, legendary coach, 500 plus wins. And then Ed Young at Nansman River We've been at a lot of different places, Suffolk High School, Norview High School in Norfolk, coached some college ball at Quinnipiac, who ironically enough now is my co-host on Saturday mornings on ESPN Radio 94.1. He was taking over at Nansemond River. And a few coaches reached out to me and helped me along the way. Ed was one, Jack, Bill Cochran. Got to shout out a lot of guys like Lonnie Blow, who was at Granby, and Dwight Robinson at Lansdowne, John Richardson. I could go on the list of coaches who kind of made my transition of learning things a lot easier, because I was a deer in headlights that first year and just really studied it. And I picked it up and liked it a whole lot. And from there, it grew to where I was doing the high school basketball beat for the site. Rod Johnson, who was at the time co-editor with Zirkle Blakey at Virginia Preps, and now is an assistant football coach at Lakeland High in Suffolk. He was kind of our guy in charge of football, asked me to come on and help him with Eastern Region football. And then from there, it morphed to where I was doing more just for the site in general, not just in Tidewater, but across the state. I ended up becoming the publisher for the site in November of 2016. And as they say, the rest is history. We're still operating through all the trials and tribulations and the things with the pandemic, and we're still rocking and rolling with high school sports.
Well, and recently you got the Old Dominion gig. And for folks who are, maybe Northern Virginians don't know, Old Dominion has a storied history in women's basketball. Men's too. They were Division II champs, I think, in '75. Alden Purnell, Dave Twardzik, some great players. With the women's team with Nancy Lieberman and I believe Ann Donovan.
Donovan, yeah, the late great Ann Donovan.
Between like 75 and 87 or so, they were the best. They were the best college basketball program. So you got that gig. How did that come about? What exactly are you doing? Are you just doing play-by-play? Or are you doing some media work?
Yes, just play-by-play. It came out of the blue. It was ironically, I got a phone call on August the 13th, asked if I was interested in the gig. I had no idea the gig was opening or was open. So I went through a process of a series of meetings with folks at Old Dominion Sports Properties. Fortunate enough that they chose me. It was never something I sought out, although once I got to thinking about it, once it was presented as the possible opportunity for me, I thought, well, that'd be pretty neat, because I grew up a lot of times. I'd go to some women's basketball games with my mom, went to then the Ted Constant Convocation Center, now Troutway Arena. Remember seeing Candace Parker of Tennessee play there and Elena Beard of Duke play there, and went to an Elite Eight game where Minnesota brought its rabid fans with, they had Lindsey Whalen and I forget the post player at the time, and they made it to the Final Four, and that place was rocking. And so I appreciate and recognize the history and tradition. And fortunate enough, I think it was in early October where they announced it. We actually announced it on my show on a Saturday morning, which is how Old Dominion wanted to do it. We had Delisha Milton-Jones, the coach there now, who played in the WNBA, was an all-star champion there, and she's doing a magnificent job. The team is 10-2. We just got back, as we recorded this, Julian, yesterday from Temple, Philadelphia. They just won their 8th in a row to move to 10-2 on the season. And you're right about the tradition in women's basketball. You think of the big name schools, the Tennessees, the UConns, the Stanfords, even Baylor in more recent years when Kim Mulkey was there. But going back to those days of Marianne Stanley with the late great Ann Donovan and Nancy Lieberman, it's just a fantastic tradition. Even in the 90s with Wendy Larry, and they had Tisha Pinachero, they lost in a national final to Tennessee and made a remarkable run there in the 90s to a title game as a D1, not out of a big glossy conference, ACC, Big 12, SEC. So far I've done 10 women's games play-by-play, working solo on the road, but on home games with Susan Montgomery, who's terrific. She's a former assistant coach of Wendy Larry. And then I filled in for Ted Alexander, the voice of the Monarchs, for football and men's basketball on 6 men's games because football conflicted. So I got to work with the ODU Sports Hall of Famer. You mentioned Dave Twardzik, former NBA champ, who's just got some remarkable stories. I wish we could go into all those. He'll have to tell you those maybe sometime if you can hook up with him, because he's got some tremendous stories from his playing days and being involved with the NBA. And so it's been a lot of great fun and a learning experience for me. And I've been really blessed. Coaches say this and some players say this, that, it's all about your teammates, but that's what's made me effective. And I hope somewhat fairly enjoyable to listen to, as I've had some great people to work with, and it's been a real pleasure with that. So far, like I said, I've done 10 women's games, 6 men's games. Unfortunately, the men have lost the 5 games that have counted that I've called. They did win an exhibition, so they're not completely winless when I've called them. The women are 10-0 in games I've called. They lost the 2 games I didn't call because I was with the men. So maybe I'm the good luck charm for the women, not so much for the men.
So are you just the audio, the radio? Or are you radio? Are you TV?
Just play-by-play for radio on the ODU Sports Radio Network, which people can pick up in Tidewater and probably across the web, ESPN Radio 94.1 FM, and then ESPN Radio 941.com. However, there are also some select games that we do that get simulcast through ESPN Plus. So just check the website, odusports.com, if you're interested in listening. There's usually a link to listen live or watch, and you can hear what we have to say.
So who are your mentors with radio? So, I grew up listening to games on the radio. So, nowadays, and you're too young to remember this, the NBA was not exposed. It was hard to see an NBA game. Like, for example, the Bullets would be on maybe 20 times a year. They would never be on the network. And so the games that we couldn't watch on TV, and they're never home games, we had to listen to on the radio. So I listened to Mel Proctor on the radio. I would listen to and Mel Proctor also did the Orioles games, but I forgot who else they had doing the Orioles games. But I grew up listening to sports on the radio, and there's something really it's amazing about it, because you're relying upon this voice to make your day, to make you happy, to make you sad, give you good news, give you bad news. So it's a different experience than when you're witnessing something yourself by watching it on TV. So anyway, did you have any mentors or people that you listen to, or even TV people that you like their style and you try to mimic?
Yeah, it's interesting you said two things on that. One, I didn't grow up with a lot of people that are play-by-play broadcasters that had this. You know how it is with baseball. So many legendary announcers, the Harry Careys, the Jack Bucks, the Vin Scully, and you definitely have to really respect what those men have done over the years. And baseball is such a different thing, I think, more than even football and basketball, because it's your companion. It's like with you every day. You're on the front porch drinking lemonade or in the backyard during the summer. It's there every day, and you have to paint that picture. Someone once told me, in fact, he's a legendary public address voice. He's done more than 100 games at Todd Stadium in Newport News for football. Bill Nettles, he said he got a letter one time from a blind lady who said she relied on everything he said at a game, it made me think differently about doing this type of job. So I never really envisioned myself being a play-by-play person. That being said, I guess one or two of the mentors I would bring up, a lot of people bring up Marv Albert, legendary guy for play-by-play. But to me, I grew up as a Utah Jazz fan, NBA. That was my team, John Stockton, Karl Malone. And we got our hearts broken twice by Michael Jordan and the Bulls. I could go on a long rant that would probably make your audience want to turn away, because I'll tell you, 98, we should have won. The Jazz should have won. 97, the Bulls were better. A couple Dick Bavetta calls that bothered me, not so much the push off with Jordan, but we'll say that for another time. But Bob Costas was the play-by-play guy, if you remember, filling in for Marv Albert during that series with Doug Collins and Isaiah Thomas. And Bob's known more for his baseball, but I think he's been really one of the gold standards for it. So I would look at him. There's a few others out there. I think Mike Breen does a great job nowadays. Obviously, Al Michaels is tremendous. So more the television voices than radio. I never, and it's weird to say this, I've done a couple things with radio before, but prior to this year, Julian, most of my play-by-play or even color analyst duties would be through the NFHS network, calling some state tournament games. I also did some work on the Hampton Road Sports Network and with Cox 11 TV. I had a show from 2011 to 2015. We did a lot of sports highlights and interviews with high school and college sports called Sports Report. And it's also up on YouTube. If people search for Cox Sports Report, you'll see a lot of the games we did, most in the Tidewater market, but we popped in some games every now and then from Northern Virginia and Roanoke as well. But I got to call some games on the TV side with John Laser, who's now the play-by-play voice for the Virginia Tech Hokies for men's basketball and football. And that was tremendous fun for a year, and have to give a lot of credit to the guy that was the brainchild of that, George Krieger, who did some work with HBO and Fox Sports, is he also really changed a lot of my thinking in terms of how you paint the picture, both as an analyst in describing the action and then as a play-by-play person, things that you do, the mechanics of it, that have really helped develop me and shape me and form me. So I didn't really have that one individual that I looked up to. A lot of kids would sit next to their radio, you're listening to, Buck or Carey or whoever it might be, legendary announcer. That wasn't the case for me, but there's certainly a lot of people that do it at a high level, and you like to try to pick and take some things they do and pay attention to it and study it.
Well, when my mother is from farm country, Ohio, central Ohio, south of Columbus, and her mother was a huge baseball fan, all sports really, but huge baseball fan. And she would listen to the Reds game and the Indians game, the two Ohio teams, every single day. That was before TBS started playing the Braves, and then I'm sorry, TBS, the Braves, and then the Cubs started coming on.
WGN, right?
Yeah, WGN. So at that point, she became fans of those teams. But yeah, I mean, your ability to build an audience and that loyalty is a very special thing. I think you're going to do great, and I wish you best of luck. And who knows, maybe that will be your next career path instead of covering the athletes, who's the best and all that. You'll be describing the games for us, and it's just great to have another quiver in your batch.
Oh, I've enjoyed it thoroughly. And two quick things. You mentioned the Reds. I got to interview on our radio show. We do a weeknight show, 757 at 6, shameless plug, 6 to 7 on ESPN Radio 94.1, ESPN Radio 941.com, and the aforementioned 757 Saturday Sports Talk that I co-host with Ed Young every Saturday from 10 a.m. to noon. But on one of the weeknight shows we did about a year or two ago, I got to interview Marty Brenneman, the legendary Reds voice. And a lot of people may or may not know, he's a Virginia native. He went to Woodrow Wilson High School in Portsmouth, which is now Manor High School. And he gave me about 35 minutes of his time, and it was just fantastic to chat with him, getting the stories of the Reds and calling Ken Griffey's home run, where he was telling us about where the announcer that he worked with, they alternate innings, and Griffey wanted him specifically to call the 500th and maybe even the 600th home run. So just hearing some of those things was just such a joy. And that's been a real cool thing to listen to some of these guys now. And like I said, I never really fashioned myself as a play-by-play person growing up or coming up here, but I'm learning it. I'm enjoying it. And the thing that's actually, I think, helped me better, especially on the road when I'm doing it solo, is for the past year and a half, 2 years, you might see it pop up on my Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. I've been doing some field hockey at the Regional Training Center in Virginia Beach. And field hockey is different in terms of its action compared to basketball and football, but you have to fill a lot more time and have information and be prepared. So that's helped even more from the preparation standpoint and the mechanic standpoint and getting reads out and some of those things. So that experience has helped me a great deal for this experience. And I'm just hoping and praying that whatever the Lord has for me in store for 2022 and beyond, that this experience will prep me and make me better moving forward.
That's great. Well, obviously, best of luck.
Thank you.
Before we get to the current basketball season and the recently concluded football season, I wanted to ask you a little bit about, are you getting offers? Are you hearing interest about this likeness thing, the athlete's likeness? Now, all of a sudden, as I said before, you were interested in high school sports before it became trendy in a media way. I mean, you were tweeting about games. I remember when I first got your Twitter feed, I'm like, this guy's he's tweeting about some normal regular season score. And it was unique. And now, everyone's kind of getting into that. We're all covering the high school sports. How do you think your life or high school sports are going to change with these other kind of new opportunities that you're hearing? I'm hearing about. I'm sure you are too.
Sure. Well, it's interesting. I got involved with the social media and Twitter, not so much because I wanted to or desired to. It was kind of a way of keeping up with the Joneses, they say, or the Times. And I saw it as a way of just getting information and data. When we do write-ups or rankings or stories, it used to be you're using the Google machine, which we do still do that, and you're searching, researching things that are reported through whatever coaches may email you or send you, or newspaper clippings or whatever it might be. But now the quickest way to search for something is you type in a school's name or something, or a player's name, and it pops up through Twitter and social media. I think it's constantly ever changing before our very eyes. I mean, we just saw a story come out. You may have seen it or know more about it than me. I saw it coming off the plane yesterday about a high school athlete who's got a 4-year type deal with name, image, and likeness. I didn't think it would trickle down to the high school this quickly, but it appears to be doing so. You hear about Bryce Young, what he got at Alabama, and his name, image, and likeness deal. And it's a way to compensate. I think a lot of the coaches, especially the old school coaches, are not comfortable with it. And I would understand and see why. If I was in their shoes, I probably wouldn't be either. And there's this feeling of, is it going to create a divide for teams? And can you keep that harmony, that chemistry? And well, this guy's getting that, I'm not. He's bigger and better than the rest of us. So you're walking a very fine, delicate line here. But the other perspective and thing I've said to even some of those old school coaches, not that I'm a proponent for it or think it's all great and everything's fantastic about it. I think my feeling is this: if there's a business or company out there that's willing to do that for a high school age kid, if they're willing to go that route, to me, I wouldn't do it, but let them. That's their own doing. If that's their thought process, that's what they think is going to get them. More power to them. I mean, I kind of say, I wouldn't say necessarily foolish, but I kind of look at it like, really, that's what your end game is here, or you're trying to accomplish. But if that's their motive or their prerogative, so be it.
Yeah, it's the Wild West. So
It is.
we'll see where it leads. So well anyway, I'm admittedly not a huge football fan. I mean, I love football, but I haven't stayed current with football like I have in other sports over the years. And I was,
You got a team?
you
You
asked me
got a
anything
pro
about.
team or no team? You got
Well,
a team?
I went to Robinson, and I'm
Uh-huh.
NFL. I like the Steelers and
Okay.
WFT, whatever that is. But
Oh,
yeah,
you broke my Arizona Cardinals' heart in Super Bowl 43.
yeah.
Larry
Well,
Fitzgerald had that moment, and it's funny. A high school coach that's a good friend of mine called me and says, "Dang, your guys about to win this game," and I'm like, "Oh, you just jinxed us, and you haven't watched our defense all year." And Aaron Francisco could not tackle, and unfortunately, Santonio Holmes, Big Ben, and your guys got it done with a Virginia native coaching, by the way, and Mike Tomlin from
That's
William & Mary
exactly
and Denby
another
High.
one of the William & Mary coaches, along with my high school classmate Joe Ellis, is from went to William &
Okay.
Mary as well.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, I went to Robinson. We had a tremendous football team. We had Chris Warren was the year behind me. Hall of Fame NFL Hall of Fame nominee.
Yeah.
We had,
Virginia Sports Hall of Famer going into it this coming year. Yeah.
oh yeah, in Virginia.
Yeah, I just had on Will Driscoll, the executive director, and he's going in the class coming up, I think, in the spring. He just got elected. Yeah.
We should, because not only was he
No
All State in football, he was honorable mention All State in basketball, and he played at UVA and also Ferrum, of course. So he was a local product that did well, and I think he did 10 plus seasons in the NFL. So it's great. But anyway, I did end up catching some games, and now that the high school games are on live, you can catch games on your computer. And I went, my kids go to Yorktown, so I caught a couple games. So I know that Oscar Smith was the powerhouse in Division 6. I know local Stonebridge was kind of like that. I think they went in single wing, whatever, repeated in spectacular fashion.
Great game against Maury. That was a fantastic game.
Yeah, so give me your thoughts. Why don't we start at Division 6 and then we go down to Division 5? And give me your thoughts about the season and how the season's ended up.
Yeah, and I'll get the people talking. We need to get an Oscar Smith Stonebridge game. Everybody talks about these matchups. We need to get this team versus this team. It's usually in a lot of areas you get that, especially down here in the 757. People say, why doesn't Oscar Smith play Maury or Green Run play this school or Phoebus and Lake Taylor, which they have played each other. And you probably get some of that up there with the Westfields, the Centervilles, the Stonebridges, and so forth. That happens all across the state, and I think it's great to get those matchups. But that's one we haven't had ever before. I'd like to see Oscar Smith and Stonebridge square off. But Oscar Smith, to me, was the best team in any division in the state. They've been a machine the last couple of years, and they've been a perennial power for years. I think this was like their 9th state championship game appearance or so since 2008. Rich Morgan was the architect of that program, built them and took them to another level. And even way back in the day before Rich Morgan got there as head coach, they had a guy that was the enforcer, played for the Seahawks a little bit before that time of Chris Warren and Kenny Easley.
Oh,
He's
yeah,
a Hall of Fame safety, and they weren't winning as much back then. It's remarkable to look back in history. You know this too, Julian, in football and basketball. There'll be this all-time great pro, a Bruce Smith at Booker T. Washington. They didn't make playoff runs. A Michael Vick didn't win playoff games at Warwick High School in Newport News. A Kenny Easley, Oscar Smith, they didn't become a national power during Kenny Easley. They did it later. And Morgan was the guy that built them and took them to another level. He's now the head coach at Marietta High School in Georgia, and he's won championships there. And then it was the late, great Bill D., Hall of Fame coach from Phoebus, who also coached in college at Old Dominion, and Christopher Newport as an assistant. Then they went to Scott Johnson, a longtime assistant. They were knocking on the door, losing to Westfield. And then Chris Scott got there, and Chris Scott led Ocean Lakes to a state championship, couple appearances, then went to Catholic High in Virginia Beach, a private school. And he's got a great rapport with the kids, really relates well. He's a very sharp mind. And now they've gone up another level to where they look like a machine. Even graduating guys going to Kansas at quarterback and Ethan Vasco, Sherrod Koval, All-American defensive back to Clemson, defensive lineman and Caleb Jones to Navy, and Martin Woodsma, offensive lineman to Old Dominion, plus a slew of others. They're not going to rebuild. They're just going to restock and reload. They were just at a different level than everybody this year, whether it was Madison, South County, who they lost to close a couple years ago, beat them pretty handily in the spring. You name the schools. I'm not sure who's going to stop them and catch them in the next couple of years, provided that they have a quarterback that steps in for Vasco who's just adequate. With that machine, you don't have to be but so great. You just got to be adequate because they have so
what kind of style do they run? What's their style?
They can go spread, they can go power. They're just multiple, and that ability allows them their kind of flexibility and versatility with a really strong defense and great guys in the trenches. I mean, they call their offensive linemen the mud diggers, and they were really powerful. Their running back, who is an unheralded player, ran for 290 yards and 3 touchdowns in the final in Kevon King. And he's getting some attention from the James Madisons of the world, the Buffaloes of the world, but he's not like a ranked guy for them. So he was like, if you're game planning, he's like maybe 5th or 6th on your checklist of guys you have to be most concerned about. But he ended up probably having a year where I think he's going to be Tidewater Player of the Year and probably first team All-State. But they were the best team. After that, I thought Stonebridge, I mean, their run, they've won now 24 straight games under Mickey Thompson. And Jacob Thomas, who I'm sure we'll talk about in basketball, and I said it on the broadcast on NFHS, he's just a stone cold killer. He's not a kid when you look at him physically that you say passes the eye test as this dominant player, but he's just got the clutch gene. He makes winning plays. They got Dylan Hundermark, who came over from basketball as well with football. Zeke Wimbush, who's a junior, who's going to get a lot of offers, I think, this offseason at wide receiver. And Mickey Thompson's one of the best in the state. He's had that program right there. And like Oscar Smith, it's funny. They were losing these heartbreakers to Westfield, double overtime, triple overtime. Look at Stonebridge. They were losing championship games to Phoebus, who, by the way, won the Class 3 state championship, to Lake Taylor. They had Jonathan Allen. Lake Taylor had Jalen Holmes, 2 NFL guys, and they were driving to win the game, fumbled. Lake Taylor held on. They lost these games close, lost to Hampton with Tyrod Taylor. So Mickey was hard looking. People were saying, man, he can't win the big game. Well, he was losing to some great teams. He wasn't losing to slouches. And now they've busted down the door, beating Highland Springs, winning. I mean, Julian, you've been doing this a long time. Have you ever seen a kid get 3 rings in 10 months the way Jacob Thomas did? He gets 27 points, 14 rebounds, and 7 assists to lead Stonebridge back from 18 down against a really good Green Run team in the state basketball championship in February. He then in May catches a one-handed touchdown pass in overtime against Highland Springs to make SportsCenter #1. And then, oh, by the way, to put the cherry on the top, well, we think the cherry on the top because he still has a chance to get a basketball state championship in December at Old Dominion in Norfolk against the Norfolk School in Maury, who's up 8. He throws the touchdown pass to his basketball mate, Hundermark, to tie it. Then he rolls left, throws back right 38 yards to Wimbush as time expires to win the state football championship. You couldn't put that in a movie script.
Okay. I'm going to try to get close to that, but I can't beat that. I'm going to fall one title short.
Okay.
There was a player named Scott Allen out of a high school called Lebanon in Appalachia.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It's
Class 1 school now, yeah.
Class 1 school. It's a small, they were never a big program in basketball. There were was a Cove Springs was near. There were some good teams near. And they played some great basketball in Appalachia.
Yeah.
This kid was the quarterback of the football team, won the state title, was the point guard of the basketball team, won the state title, was the shortstop of the baseball team, lost in the state final. So he almost got you. Yeah, and now he's a principal. Now he's a principal at the junior high school in that area.
How about that? And there's some great multi-sport athletes. I mean, you think of Jamie Kaiser up in the north now, and Ireton was at Lake Braddock. I mean, I think what Thomas has done, I'm not saying that he's the total athlete, but his accomplishments are up there with guys that you put up there with like the Terry Kirbys, the Ronald Currys, the Allen Iversons, the Juan Thornhill from Alta Vista. Small school. Look at Juan Thornhill. He's now playing with the Kansas City Chiefs on Sundays, defensive back for a team that's played in back-to-back Super Bowls, and people didn't pay much attention to him until it was too late. He went to UVA, didn't have a slew of offers. I'm just amazed that some people, I guess their question is, well, he doesn't run this in the 40. Kid's a gamer. He's a winner. And there's a lot of those. A guy that comes to mind was Tyler Scanlon a couple years ago at Westfield. He won basketball and football, and it was like, this kid's a gamer. He goes to Boston U. He does well. They're like, there's just certain players that, and sometimes that happens in a recruiting game. If you don't have a certain vertical leap, if you don't have a certain measurable, a certain 40, you're not that guy on the top 5 of the list for us at Virginia Preps or Rivals or whatever. But he's been fun to watch, and they're going to be a threat in basketball. And then to finish up on the football thing real quickly, 4-1, Verina out of Richmond beat Broad Run, who had a great year with Brett Griffiths leading the way at quarterback, who's going to Wake Forest. Verina just ran the ball, and they've been a program in Richmond. They'd had all these athletes for years and years and years. Couldn't get over that hump. They finally beat Highland Springs this year. They got over the hump, winning Class 4, dropping down from Class 5 to Class 4 helped them, much like it did with Phoebus, who used to be in Class 4. They win Class 3 over Liberty Christian. That was a little bit of a surprise to me because Liberty Christian was loaded with studs. They had the Gatorade Player of the Year on the offensive line, and Zach Rice, who's going to North Carolina, a 5-star, a quarterback headed to UVA, a tight end going to Army, and Phoebus pulled it out with great defense. Their defensive backs were probably one of the best units of positions in the state. And then Class 2.
Let's slow down on that. Liberty Christian. Now, I didn't realize this. They sued to be allowed to play in the VHSL back, I think, 5 or 6 years ago. I was talking to a buddy of mine, Tim Moss, who played football at UVA, went to Heritage. His kids went there. He sent me a whole bunch of articles. I didn't even see this. and I think they're one of the only private schools that play in the VHSL. Do you
They are
think
the only one. Yeah.
is this going to be a trend we're going to see more often? And how do you feel about it?
I don't think so. I think that this was something Liberty Christian had been planning and wanting to do for a while. I don't think that I don't know if I would say the infrastructure or resources, but all the things are in alignment for that to happen for other private schools. I think most of them are pretty content and satisfied being in the VISAA. I don't think it'll happen. If it does, maybe one or two more. I don't see it being a trend where you see a bunch of schools trying to get in and that actually taking effect. So I think it was, but I do think they're going to be back in the picture for football, and their baseball's been very good. And in basketball, we're going to see Liberty Christian as a contender in Class 3 in a variety of sports, and in the bigger ones like football, basketball, and baseball.
Now, do they still have the same restrictions that the public schools have in terms of recruiting and those kind of things?
Yeah, they have to follow a lot of the guidelines. I mean, that the Virginia High School League has set in place in terms of rules and regulations. But I mean, granted, in this day and age now, with all these different things going on, I mean, I think there's certainly, I wouldn't say necessarily an enticement on their part, but for some parents and for some athletes to want to go to a place like that, given that just they have an environment that's a little bit different than your typical private or public school. I mean, look, they played all their football games this year at Liberty University. So it's almost like a cell without a cell. Like, you can come play here and play on a big stadium before you go to college.
Yeah. So, and also Phoebus, how would they have done against Oscar Smith? Are there a lot of Division III schools in the area? I mean,
they played them, and they played into the regular season. They scheduled a game. Both teams had a spot in their schedule, and it didn't turn out too well. 42-0, Phoebus lost to Oscar Smith. Now, I think this was a game that was needed to be done maybe back in 2008, 2010, when Bill D was there, Richard Morgan was there, because those Phoebus teams were at just a different level. I do think Jeremy Blunt has done a great job there, and that loss and playing them helped them without any doubt for the playoffs, because it kind of gave them a measure of where they were. They played Lake Taylor, who had been in 3 consecutive state championships, and Hank Sawyer is a coaching legend. This Lake Taylor team was down this year. They beat them pretty soundly to begin the year. And Phoebus was playing at a level early in the year where I thought they could have played Oscar Smith to a close game. Their level kind of tailed off. Their defense was pretty strong and consistent all year. Their offense had some ebbs and flows. And towards the end of the season, I think they needed that game to kind of wake them up. I interviewed some of their kids at a showcase the weekend after that loss, and a lot of them were just really down, but they got revved up. They played Hopewell in the second round. That was a key turning point game for them on their playoff journey, I think, because Hopewell had knocked them out a couple of years back in the playoffs, and they've been in the state championship game a couple of times and won a couple of them with Trevion Henderson leading the way, who's a fabulous freshman at Ohio State. And one more player and team, or 2 more teams I want to mention now. Riverheads in Class 1 won their 6th consecutive state championship, a VHSL record. They've won 50 games in a row, and this is a streak the longest in the country right now, 50 straight wins.
And Riverheads is near Charlottesville, but near Waynesboro, is that right?
Yeah, it's out there, up that way, the Stanton area, but they get covered a lot. But outside of that, and people on our message boards are rabid about them. There are tons of Riverheads fans, and Robert Casto has done a unbelievable job there. And in Class 2, King William beat Graham. King William has a running back going to Wake Forest named Damon Claiborne, who scored 52 touchdowns this year, 3rd most in Virginia High School League history in a season, behind the Henderson kid I mentioned, who's at Ohio State now from Hopewell, and Elijah Lala Davis, who plays at Old Dominion and played at Heritage High in Lynchburg. And King William, that kid, that Claiborne kid going to Wake, Julian, I said before the season, he's the fastest kid in the state. And I think he's going to be an impact guy at Wake Forest, coming from a small school, which, again, they don't get the publicity that other schools at bigger levels do. But, man, he was something else, because if you take him off that team, they're good, but they're not winning the state championship. Not happening.
Is King William considered Tidewater? I know it's kind of in that
804-757. I think they're technically in the 804 area code, so they're more claimed by Richmond than Tidewater. But you win a championship, they both claim you.
Okay. All right. Yeah, exactly. All right. So as we transition to basketball, you mentioned Bruce Smith earlier today. So when I was a young guy, I was at the state tournament. My sister played every year. Robinson won 2 when she was there, and that's how I became a big fan of high school basketball, especially the state tournament. Well, Bruce Smith was there for Booker T. Washington, and he was there for 2 years. I saw him 2 different seasons, and one year Booker T, they lost to Garfield, and the next year in the finals, Othell Wilson ended up playing at UVA and in the NBA as well. The next year they lost to Robert E. Lee out of Springfield. And so Bruce Smith used to always brag about his basketball as when he was a pro football player. He bragged about he could have been the Charles Barkley. He's a player you'll never forget because he was so big. He couldn't catch the ball. He was so, he definitely had an impact. But I used to listen to him brag about his basketball. I'm like, dude, you're a great NFL defensive end. You are not Charles Barkley. Yeah.
It's funny because Barkley, I've been listening to some of his podcasts he does with Ernie Johnson and some of the guest they talk about where he played a big time player that went to Alabama and he just annihilated him in a Christmas tournament. That's how Barkley blew up because he was mostly getting JUCOs and recruiting level attention of that. And it's funny, I got to cover Bruce Smith's son who played football at Cox High School, Alston, who went on to Virginia Tech.
That was all right.
And had Bruce in studio and just such a wonderful guy. And I can only imagine the stories of what they are in other sports when you see it. Because I'd say the guy people, and I didn't get a chance to watch him or cover him, but everybody raves to this day. Even my co-host, Coach Young, says about Allen Iverson on the football field. If he had played football, he could have been a Pro Bowler in the NFL like he was an MVP in the NBA. So.
Yeah, no, I saw him in that state final. I'm sure you've probably seen part of it on YouTube.
I have two clips. Yeah.
Yeah. So
and those are fantastic. I love watching those old games. Oh, I could spend hours and days if I ever get a vacation just doing that. I spent some of the COVID time in the summer looking back at some of those old YouTube games. The Hampton Schools channel does a great job with some of those archive games. It's fun to watch. It really is. Oh,
it's great. YouTube is such an awesome thing. So, well, basketball. I saw a latest top 10 out and this is the problem with the 6 classifications for basketball. I think 6 of the 7 teams of the top 10 in Division 6 in Virginia basketball are Northern Virginia schools.
Yes.
And the frustration is that that those Division 5 schools that are from other parts of the state are excellent teams as well. And we're gonna end the season without knowing who's the best. We're gonna have 6 titleists, and we're gonna have that same frustration that we have every year. So anyway, maybe you can preview. Not only preview and tell us what you've seen so far in Division 6 and Division 5.
Well, it's interesting. When I first did the rankings, and it's an inexact science, people are going to always have gripes with them. We're never 100% right. We do like to pride ourselves at the end of the year, though. We try to get, generally when the state champs are crowned, we like to say that we had all 6 of them in our top 5 or somewhere pretty lofty in the top 10. I thought when the year began, and Class 6 the pendulum has swung because, Julian, when we had realignment, I was the one that always said and argued that Class 5 was the best and the deepest because every year you'd have, I remember one year when all the 1 seeds got beat, the combined record of the 1 seeds that lost to 2 seeds, this was like when we took like the final 8 or whatever it was for state, was like 77-14 because it was just powerful. It was loaded with Potomac at that time. They were still 5. They weren't 6. You had out of Richmond, Henrico and LC Bird. Out of Tidewater, and Verina, by the way, was in 5. In Tidewater, you had the Green Run, Norview, Hamptons. Like your 7th and 8th place team in the state rankings, I argued could win 6 and 4. They could, and they were that good. Those teams were, and we've seen all those teams kind of go through it. None of them have repeated. Green Run came very close, but none of them repeated at 5. Whether it was Henrico or Potomac or Verina or LC Bird, or none of them repeated. So that tells you how competitive I think Class 5 was. And there's been some programs that have been very close. Wakefield's one of them that jumps to mind. Tony Bentley's been knocking on that door for years. And some guys that knocked on the door for years busted it down in Class 6. Doug Yule did it at Westfield. Doug Craig did it at W.T. Woodson. And Colonial Forge kept Dwight Robinson at Lansdowne from doing it. And he's now won 1 and might get a second one. When the year began, though, I figured even though as deep and as talented as Class 6 was, we're on a collision course between Lansdowne on the beach with Donald Hand Jr., the young man who was 29 of 29 from the foul line in the state semifinal loss to Potomac back in the COVID season, and Hatfield. Carlos Poindexter has been building this Hatfield program. They surprised some folks last year by beating both Lake Braddock with Kaiser and South County with that group that Mike Robinson had led by Andre Spate and Trenton Picott in the playoffs, and then fell to Centerville, which won back-to-back in the Class 6 championship. They actually lost them in the semifinals. Centerville beat Potomac in the final, but Hayfield brought back pretty much everybody. They got back Braylon Wheeler and Ashton Pratt and DJ Holloway, Greg Jones, who's a D1 stud junior prospect. David King is the most unheralded kid in the state, the kid with the goggles. He reminds me of a throwback kid, 6'2" kid from Tidewater that can go get 20 and 10. You say, how does he do it? He just has a knack for getting rebounds and making plays underneath against bigger guys. So we've got Hayfield scheduled to play in our Virginia Preps Classic in January, so we're looking forward to seeing them come down here to the 757. But I felt like, and I still do, those two are on a collision course, but we've seen some teams kind of make some noise here. Fairfax has been impressive here early on with Margod, Troy Jolson leading the way for Coach Mike Barbie. You've got Lake Braddock having a surprise year. With Quincy Vaya for them, for Coach Mitras, they lost a lot. And you say, this is the post Kaiser Solomon team, but here they are unbeaten. They just beat Centerville. Centerville went through the coaching change. They obviously don't have the same studs that they had previously with Kazemka and Ford, Chris Kazemka and Avery Ford moving on to the next level. But I still think they're going to be a factor. So I think you begin in Class 6 and you look at Lansdowne and Hatfield, because Lansdowne probably has an easier path to get to the final than, say, Hayfield, given that all these teams in Northern Virginia are so competitive and right there in the mixture. But when push comes to shove, if they bring their A game, I don't think anybody touches Hayfield's A game unless it's Lansdowne with a guy in Donald Hand who can dominate the game, and late in game, he just doesn't miss free throws, and keeping him off the foul line is a chore.
So is the bleeding of talent towards private schools the same all over the state? Like, for example, this Donald Hand guy,
Yes.
he's playing,
Yeah.
but in Northern Virginia, I've gone to 8 or 9 games this year. I'm like the new Matthew Hatfield up here. I've been going to a lot of games and been loving it, and I've been really impressed by the talent level. I've been pleasantly impressed. But anyway, do you see the bleeding of talent the same all over the state, or is it worse in some parts of the state than others?
It goes through cycles where it's worse in a given year, but the guys out west complain about it. That's the worst there. The guys down here in Tyler complain about it. Richmond's going through it. Northern Virginia's go through it. It happens everywhere because you have that enticement of reclassification to get the extra year. Now, my argument back is look at the guys, and I can go through a litany of players, and we probably don't have the time to, nor people care to know the exact names, but there's a litany of guys that go post-grad. You can go to Fort Union, you can go to Hargrave and still get those opportunities. So I think to me, nobody has given me proven data that says going to a private school helps you or going to a private school hurts you. There's no proven data. It's all opinion-based. It's all about fit for whatever kid in whatever situation, but it's happening. But kudos to the programs that have been able to get through this, because it's been hard for some. You lose 1 or 2 guys in basketball. It's different, Julian, than in football. If you're a Northern Virginia power in football, your Westfields, your Stonebridges, your Centervilles, those schools of the world, you lose 1 or 2 guys, you just plug in another guy. Basketball, it depletes your team for not 1 year. It can deplete you for 2 or 3 years. But we've seen some teams navigate even without some of these D1 studs. Take a look at, I didn't bring up South Lakes, doing a great job this year. I like what Coach Mike Desmond's doing there. He doesn't have a lot of hallmark level guys there, but he's still getting it done with a bunch of solid basketball players that aren't your ballyhoo D1 recruits. And most of your D1 guys, through the channels of the travel ball, through the channels of we can get you that D1 scholarship if you reclassify and go here, that's been what we're seeing more and more, go towards. And I think to a certain extent it has hurt the basketball, but I think more so in areas outside of Northern Virginia, because pretty much everybody played up there last season. We're seeing a really a level down of play in Tidewater and Richmond than in previous years, which I think at times you could argue the strength has been in those areas. Just look at the championship history. I think not having a season this past year with COVID because of that really has hurt a lot of the schools. And it's not just for 1 year. It has an effect, I think, for 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, I know TC Williams Alexandria City now did not have a season last year. There were teams throughout other parts of the state that didn't play last year.
Oh, there was about 60 to 70 schools. For example, just take Tidewater, Richmond as my examples here. The only schools, there's like 5 districts in Tidewater: the Beach, Eastern, Southeastern, Peninsula, Bay Rivers. The only districts that played last year in Tidewater were the Beach, which was your Green Runs, your Lansdowns, your Salems of the world, and the Bay Rivers. The Eastern did not play, so Norview didn't get a chance to defend its co-championship. Think about that. If you're a junior at Norview and you're getting ready to play a state championship, the game gets canceled. You're a co-champ. Well, I'll get it my senior year. No, you don't get a senior year. You don't get to play. So your last game was a state semifinal win of your high school career. And let's say you're a player that's going to get recruited. It's a big deal. And now you see the kids in college get the extra year, the COVID year. They're recruiting grad transfers. It has had a real impact on recruiting for high school to college for basketball, way more than football, although football's starting to see a little bit ripple effect with all these quarterbacks and transfers taking place there, that it's making some of those kids on the border, the bubble kids, colleges think twice about them. But the Southeastern didn't play, so Kings Fork didn't get a chance to have a repeat. The Peninsula didn't play. Now, there were some schools in Chesapeake that had a spring season, like a few of the schools up there in that Winchester area did. I know they did like a spring season that didn't count towards the VHSL. The Sharandos of the world, some of those schools, the Millbrooks had like a condensed 6 to 8 game season. The Chesapeake schools did that, but they didn't get a chance to compete for a Virginia High School League championship or tournament. And I was one that was pretty outspoken about this. I think the Virginia High School League made the best of a tough situation given that the circumstances they had to deal with. But I was one that wanted to see things get pushed back because I think it would have allowed more teams to play. You would have had a better measure, and I think you could have had more games. Now, the counter argument to that was, well, now you're running into the spring. And quite honestly, you do that anyway. You overlap anyway. So my argument is, the multi-sport kids are just special and different. There's not a whole lot of them anyway. They'll find a way to figure it out. We already overlapped anyway. So I didn't think it was as big a deal. Others thought so, and they did what they did. So,
yeah. Well, how about the smaller schools? What do you see out there for divisions 1 through 4? Any great teams, great players that we haven't talked about?
Yeah, I think people love to find that either that diamond in the rough or that big name player. And in Class 2, you have a young man, though his team may not win the state championship, Tyler Nickel at East Rockingham High School out in Elkton, Virginia. He's closing in on potentially the Virginia High School League scoring record. It was held for many years by Allen Iverson. It got broken a couple of years back by Mac McClung of Gate City, who certainly made some noise playing at Georgetown, then Texas Tech, and then played in the summer league, I know, with the Lakers. Nichols in great position to break that scoring record, which is impressive given that they didn't have a full season last year. He could still break that mark at East Rockingham. So they're one to watch out for. Radford under Coach Rick Cormany doesn't have a hallmark level player, but he's a guy with over 700 wins, and they've won like 6 state championships under him. So you keep an eye out for them. And John Marshall, I mentioned about the Richmond schools not playing. John Marshall didn't play last year. Verona didn't play. Henrico didn't play. Now, LC Bird did play, and they lost to Green Run in the state semis. And they got a chance to make a run at it in Class 5 this year under Coach Troy Manns, who was a heck of a player back in his day, and he's going for his 2nd state championship. But John Marshall in Class 2 may be the best public school in any division. Yes, they're that good. They just played Lancetown about a week and a half ago. Was there, lost in overtime without 3 starters. And Lancetown's a classic school. And they've got a junior in Dennis Parker Jr., who is a wing that is athletic as all get out, doesn't realize how good he is, and just got offered this week by Kansas. And at times, as good as he is, at times he can be their 2nd or 3rd option on the floor. So Ty White, who obviously is well connected through the Team Loaded travel program, they've built a big time program that they've won a few state championships. They're the best team in Class 2, and they play top level competition out of state foes all the time. So they're a small school, but they're really not a small school for basketball. They're kind of a factory in terms of what they've been doing here lately. And they play publics, they play privates, they take on all comers, as they say. And in Class 1, give you a real quick name in a school, Perry McClure. They're coached by Mike Cardellaro, who led Alta Vista to state championships during that Juan Thornhill era. They're going for back-to-back, and they have a 6'11" kid in the paint named Spencer Hamilton. And I say 6'11" in the paint, Julian, because as basketball is played these days, he can step out and shoot threes. And he doesn't do it every now and then. He does it pretty consistently. He's got touch away from the basket, and he is really, really, really good. In fact, in his first game, he put up some just mind-boggling numbers. I got some clips from Coach Cardellaro as I pull him up here now, what his stats were. This was his season opener for a kid. And again, what's amazing about them is if you watch Perry McClure, and you can watch them on the NFHS, or you can pull up some of their games, I'm sure, online, they play kind of a deliberate style. So not a run and gun team like some of these small schools will be, the Class 2, Class 1. You'll get some games where it's, 78-76 or 85-83. His first game of the year, 39 points, 13 rebounds, 10 blocks, 5 dunks. They beat Rockbridge 68-45.
Maybe he's the next Brad Knuckles. Remember from was it Council? That kid that went to I guess he went to Tennessee Chattanooga, or you go to East Tennessee State.
I think so. That's a good one.
Yeah. So so we have John Marshall. We have Hayfield.
Mm-hmm.
How do those in Lansdowne? I got to throw Patriot in there because Sherman's going to kill me if I don't.
Listen, Patriots got a good team, and they're coming on to play Western Branch in our Virginia Preps Classic. And that's a guy who's built a program coming from Potomac, who's had them knocking on the door. It's just been getting over that Potomac hurdle, and he beat him first game of the year. So maybe this is his year. He can kind of bust through. We'll see. Exactly.
How do those teams measure up against the best private schools in the state, the Benedictines, the Cape Henry, I believe, or
Yeah, Cape Henry. Well, I think Paul VI is the one who just played last night against Sierra Canyon on TV. I was getting texts last night coming back from Old Dominion. I watched our men's team play. I didn't get a chance to watch it, but like, you watching this Sierra Canyon game, Paul VI game. And by the way, I've got some friends in the pro circles, and I'm sure you too. Darren Harris, Kevin Harris's son, he is a baller and he can stroke that thing. He's good. He is a player. People want to know who's next. He's next. He can play. I know they got Doug McDaniel going to Michigan, the point guard, and Doug's very, very good. Take another from Doug, but get on Darren Harris now, because he can play and he's going to make some noise. And if he keeps progressing, you never know. A kid keeps growing and learning from pops. He might make money one day playing this game. But I think most of them compare. Blue Ridge is another private school I'd throw up there.
Blue Ridge. Wow.
Yeah, Blue Ridge. Kate Lemke's done a tremendous job there. He coached a couple of years of college ball, and they've been producing a lot of college players. You put on TV, you'll see Amir Sims was playing at Clemson. You'll see Darius McGee, who's now playing for Liberty, one of their best players. An undersized guard who came to our Virginia Preps Classic against Maury out of Norfolk and dropped like 6-7 threes, and he's been a really proficient player at the next level for the Flames. They produce about 6-7 college players a year. So Blue Ridge is up there. We've got Miller School coming down to our event. They've been producing a lot of college players. They've got some guys, Eli DeLauriere, young kid, big kid who's got a lot of potential. Austin Ball's a top 150 shooter in the country who's got some attention. I think they compare, and that's the thing we like to do sometimes in our event is mix. You got to have a dance partner. You got to it takes two to tango. So you got to have the public willing to play the private and the private willing to play the public. But we'll do that from time to time to give that matchup you don't often see in our event. We've had the Cape Henrys of the world, the Lancetowns of the world, the Blue Ridges of the world play those teams. The Miller's going to play Maury in our event this year. And by the way, I'd throw up there in the public school ranks, the Class 4 battle collision course. The best game we might see all year if it happens in any division is Kings Fork versus Varina, if we get that in a state semi or state playoff matchup in Class 4, as those two programs have loads of talent. Varina's got Alfonso Billups going to VCU, very athletic, flashy guard, and Kings Fork's got George Beal going to Long Island University, and they're both pretty deep. So that could be the best matchup we see all year. But I'd say it goes in ebbs and cycles, ebbs and flows. I'd say the privates, though, probably have a little bit of a smidge edge against the publics, especially as you climb up closer to Northern Virginia with the Paul VI and the O'Connells of the world.
But it seems like after Paul VI and after O'Connell, the rest of it's more there's parity. But
yes,
it's just those two
yes.
Sounds like they were kind of a step above the rest.
I'd say your top 4 private schools probably beat your top 4 public schools, but from public school, private school teams like 5 through 15, it's about even to where you might even see a slight edge to the publics. That's what I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, look, man, this has been great, man. Being able to talk sports with you, I'm a big fan of all your work. I think you're a credit to all the folks who cover high school sports, who coach. You make these games relevant. You keep these people in the spotlights. You do a tremendous service for these guys. I'm glad you're finally, getting your due. You're getting bigger and bigger gigs because you definitely deserve it. The people out here appreciate what you do. Hopefully you'll come back and we can do this again.
Anytime.
Oh yeah, we'll come back before the tournament start and you can preview for us the postseason. I would love to do that.
I'd be glad to do it. And I've really enjoyed, and thank you for what you do. Getting a chance to watch some of your interviews with, I'm going to forget some coaches, and they'll probably text me when they see this. The Doug Yules, the Dermia Marshalls at West Springfields, the Doug Craigs, the Tony Bentleys, the Sherm Riverses, all those guys. I love your coaches roundtable with Carlos Poindexter, all those guys that get on there with it. It's been fantastic to watch, and it's a great service for those programs and those coaches. Those kids deserve it, and it's been outstanding to watch those. Your interview with Chris Kazemka was outstanding too. He's a superb young man. But keep doing what you're doing. I love watching that content, and thank you so much. I'll be glad to do it anytime, and have a happy holiday and a happy New Year. Hopefully we keep our fingers crossed we get this basketball in and we don't have the ugly COVID that causes havoc with things.
Yeah, you too. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas. But I do think we might have a couple tough weeks, but I think it's going to pass. I think we may have some games backed up and maybe without spectators for a while, maybe masks back on for a while. But I think we'll definitely we're in better shape this year than we were last year.
We've gone through it once, so hopefully we can get through it again.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right. Well, Matthew, again, thanks again for doing this. Let's keep in touch, and I'm looking forward to talking to you next time.
You bet, Julian. Really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, enjoyed it. Yeah. Take care, buddy.
Thank you.